I'm Target 12 investigator Tim White, and I'm joined by my colleague in the investigative unit, Eli Sherman. Eli, as you know, we have been getting a lot of questions into 12 Responds about why the travel restriction from Rhode Island to Massachusetts is still in place by Governor Charlie Baker, especially when you look at the positivity rate set by Johns Hopkins, which is sort of the bellwether nationally. We are well below the 5% positivity rate. As a matter of fact, we're below 2%. So a lot of people are asking, why hasn't Baker lifted the travel restriction from Massachusetts? What's the answer?
The short answer is because they're tracking a second metric. So one of their metrics is travelers have to be coming from a state with a positivity rate below 5%. No problem for Rhode Island, as you mentioned. We're now below 2% pretty regularly. But the second metric is a test positive, test positive rate. So that is looking at an average of positive tests per capita each day. And that has to be below 6 in Massachusetts for travelers to come in there and move around freely. During this month of August, we're taping this right at the end of August, Rhode Island has been sort of between 8 and 10 each day when in terms of this metric, which is just above that 6 tests per day that is required in order to go into Massachusetts freely. As you can see on this chart right here, we did dip below that amount briefly, beginning in mid-June, sort of towards the end of July, but after moving into phase 3 of the state's reopening plan and cases started to tick up just a little bit, and now they've leveled off, but unfortunately they've leveled off just above that threshold that's been set by public health officials and Governor Charlie Baker in Massachusetts.
So I think a lot of people want to know, I think it's safe to assume then when our positivity rate, the Johns Hopkins version anyway, went below 5%, you saw other states lift those restrictions. So are you saying that Massachusetts is far more cautious when it comes to, this and has this additional metric when, say, Connecticut doesn't?
Yeah, you bring up a good point, Tim. There's sort of a hodgepodge of travel policies state by state. They all look a little bit different, which, makes it challenging for someone or people, for someone who commutes between states or has family. A lot of people in Rhode Island have family in Connecticut, have family in Massachusetts. So they're trying to navigate these different policies. Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, they created a pact in terms of travel policy, basically saying, okay, we're going to follow all the same metrics to give continuity between the tri-state area. And their threshold, this positive test rate or test positive rate, is actually 10, where Massachusetts is 6. So Rhode Island briefly, according to the numbers that they are following, went above that earlier this month, but only just for about a week. So Rhode Islanders weren't allowed to travel freely in Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey. And Massachusetts on that same day was like, oh yeah, you're also above our rate. So Rhode Island was restricted from traveling in Massachusetts. About a week later, the tri-state area removed Rhode Island from its list, but ever since then, Rhode Island has remained above that 6 per 100,000 per capita. That is the requirement in Massachusetts.
So we saw in that chart, it was up super high, dipped down, phase 3 came in, as you pointed out, and it went back up. Is there any indication that Rhode Island is starting to go on the decline or, in certain direction, that test positive rate? And does Rhode Island's size, meaning its population, 1.1 million or so on and so forth, does its size impact that because the swings would be greater?
It's a good question, and I wish I had a crystal ball to know exactly where this is going. But I would say that recently, after the state moved into phase 3, there certainly was an uptick in cases, and those have sort of leveled off. But one thing I'm definitely watching closely, Tim, is that the governor of Rhode Island, public health officials in the state are really trying to ramp up testing. They say that they're going to be getting upwards closer to 10,000 tests. That's what they're trying to get to, especially in this lead up to schools reopening, which will, if the prevalence of the disease is consistent across the state and we start testing a whole lot more people, you probably see more cases happening, showing up each day. It's just simple arithmetic. And so if that's the case, then you will have sort of a higher average new daily test rate than maybe you would have before. How that affects travel policy, it's hard to say. And I should note that, these rules have changed. Massachusetts travel policy, this current one, has only been in place since August 1st. It's possible that, tomorrow or in a week or in a month, everything's jiggered because they have better information, or they decided that, this hodgepodge of travel policy between states that border one another isn't going to work effectively.
It's a good point. We'll have to keep an eye on that as more testing happens. All right, finally, we should point out that these restrictions for Rhode Islanders into Massachusetts aren't absolute. For instance, if I need to cover a story, which I often do in Fall River, I can do that, right?
Yeah, there are exceptions to the rule. Work is certainly one of them. People who commute for work at least once per week are exempt from the restrictions, which I should mention are, if you're coming into Massachusetts from Rhode Island for reasons that are not in the exemptions, you have to quarantine for 14 days. Or if you can show a test that shows that you have tested negatively for the disease recently, I think it's 3 days, you are allowed to go in there freely. And Rhode Island, to its credit, has been trying to prioritize or give people who are trying to figure out their travel plans into Massachusetts tests so that they can continue to do what they were planning to do. And the third caveat is, of course, shopping, which was a big question when Charlie Baker rolled this out initially. For people who live on the border and may do their grocery shopping in Massachusetts or vice versa, that is still allowed. I think the governor said, come in, wear a mask, do your shopping, go home, and the travel effect is not going to affect you.
So work, medical, and shopping are the three exceptions. All right, Eli, thank you. And as I said off the top of this video, these questions came into 12 Responds, which is a section on our website, WPRI.com, where tens of thousands of people have been emailing in questions or sending in questions. And that's when we look to get you answers. If you want to send in a question to 12 Responds, Eli has put a link in his article. And thank you for watching this video on WPRI.com.